Thanks everyone, and I just have to follow up on what Tim said. There was an article recently in the Seward Journal that was titled Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute quietly celebrated their 30-year anniversary. And that's just been our MO since the beginning. We just kind of have been doing our own thing and being very successful at it, but we've heard from a lot of our partners and stakeholders that it's time to start showcasing what you do. So I'm thankful that you guys have invited me here today. Point it here, I'm guessing? There we go. All right, there's a couple things I have to do, directed by my board of directors. First one of those is a land acknowledgement. Just going to read that to you very quickly. Actually, let me back up. I did want to talk a little bit about myself. When I was born, my parents brought me home to a fish hatchery in Prince William Sound. When I was 4, my mom, bless her heart, decided it was time for me to go to school, and we moved to Moose Pass when I was 4. And my dad worked at the fish hatchery there. I was the only kid in my graduating class in 8th grade at Moose Pass, go Bulls, and then moved on to Seward High School and graduated class of 2003, go Seahawks. So it's just a little bit about me. My family still is in Moose Pass, and it's just that's our place, and so happy to call the peninsula home. All right, back to the land acknowledgement. We would like to first acknowledge the land that we occupy in our Anchorage headquarters as the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. The Dena'ina have been the stewards of this land for thousands of years, and we would like to give recognition and show our appreciation to them, their land, and their continued stewardship. We would also like to acknowledge the space and land we utilize for our Marine Institute in Seward, and the land, our tribes, the traditional region of the Chugach people of Alaska. The Chugach people encompass the Sukbiak, which translates to like a real person, and Alutiiq people who have lived off the coastal land and waters of the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, Lower Cook Inlet, and Resurrection Bay for thousands of years. We want to acknowledge our land and water, which brings us life and culture, and our tribes who maintain our relationship with the land. These include Cordova and the native village of Eak, Nanwalik, Nuchek, Port Graham, Seward and the Chugach Native Tribe, Alutiiq and the Valdez Native Tribe. The purpose of this statement is for acknowledgement, appreciation, and respect for our land. Thank you for listening to that. That's very important to my board. So, a little bit about ourselves. Chugach Regional Resources Commission is a nonprofit entity. We are located in Anchorage, although at the beginning of the pandemic we lost our physical infrastructure, but a lot of our employees are still there. We serve the 7 tribes. I'm just going to skip around here a little bit. We serve the 7 tribes in Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet. I already mentioned them, but I'll do it again. Port Graham and Nanwalik, of course, in Lower Cook Inlet. Chugach Native Tribe in Resurrection Bay. Chiniga, Alutiiq, Native Village of Eak, and the Valdez Native Tribe in Prince William Sound. We were incorporated in 1984. We are actually the federally recognized consortia that deals with natural resources on behalf of these communities, and it's much like the state of Alaska. As you can imagine, most of these communities are incredibly small, so when the ability to manage natural resources was given to the tribes, they have 30 people there. They just couldn't do that. Health, housing, and so what they did was they organized and made one natural resource government body. We operate the Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute in Seward, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that facility. We treat them as a division, but truly we're all one organization. As you can see, this area is very broad. It's very limited in services. It's culturally, economically, and environmentally diverse, which makes all of our jobs a lot of fun. On any given day, I do all kinds of things. Okay, I'm going to take another quick break. Our board director, board chairman, he's also the chief of Port Graham Village Council. He likes to acknowledge our presence at all of these, and he wrote a little note that he wants me to read to you today. It's very quick, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation. Does this have a pointer? That's Mr. Patrick Norman right there. Kamai, as chairman of the board of Chugach Regional Resources Commission, I speak for my tribe, as well as others in Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet, when I say that we are thrilled to have the opportunity to share a part of our culture with you today. For our communities, natural resources are a gift. Traditional foods and our traditional homelands restore physical health and are central to cultural and spiritual traditions. Healthy and productive people are the cornerstone of our healthy communities. The intrinsic value of harvesting and consuming local foods in traditional ways cannot be overstated. A local statement is, when the tide is out, the table is set. Our people have a great potential in shaping a region that feeds the future in a way that strengthens our relationship with all living things and promotes cultural continuity. This can be done by becoming more than just users of the land and the sea, but practicing reciprocity. This means promising to always have good stewardship, promote collaboration, and celebrate the spirit of generosity through acknowledging the wealth of our traditional foods and people. Koyana. So thank you, Mr. Norman, for providing that to me. Here's a photo of Seward on a really good day. This was not taken last week, I can promise you that. We occupy a space that's in the city's institutional zoning area. Over here, of course, you have the famous Alaska Sea Life Center. Right, these buildings right here are the University of Alaska Fairbanks Seward Marine Center. And over here is our Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute. APMI was built by the state of Alaska in 1992 with criminal settlement money from the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council. It was built to be a shellfish hatchery and a mariculture technical center. Following the completion of the building, the state gave the ownership to the city of Seward, who the state never had any interest in operating it, and neither did the city. For a couple years, with CERC's help, at the time, Marathon Native Tribe, now Chugach Native Tribe, operated the facility. They also decided that they didn't want to operate it, and we took over full operation in 1994. Since then, we have invested heavily into the maintenance of the facility and the physical plant, upgrading and trying to make it state-of-the-art. What's interesting about our funding that's very different from a lot of other nonprofits is that we have programmatic funding through the Bureau of Indian Affairs under two different revenue streams. The first is the Public Law 638, and that is a contract that we have had negotiated with the Bureau since, I want to say 1987. Provides most of our operating budget, salaries, fringe, and then recently we started receiving money that's through the BIA Section 105L lease program. I know those all sound really fancy, but that's just how they funnel money. That program is very interesting. It's for the maintenance of the actual infrastructure of the building, so the walls out, the floors, the windows, doors, roof, and what those two continual programmatic funding sources, if you will, have allowed us to do is really focus on the services that we provide to our tribes. I recently found this picture of the Marathon Native Association first employees at the hatchery, so I just had to throw it up there. I don't know if anyone's seen this in a long time, but then here's another front view of our facility. So this here is a list of all of the species that we have had and have currently in our facility. We're considered the only shellfish hatchery in the state and one of two tribally managed hatcheries. The second one is in Metlakatla. They actually have a fish hatchery there. We have a shellfish hatchery, a nursery, we do research and development, and we've been part of the mariculture industry since inception. As you see here, we have oysters, little neck, butter, soft shell clams. We've done red king crab. We're currently doing research on sea cucumbers for the commercial, subsistence, and personal use fisheries. And most recently, we've been getting our feet wet, literally, in the kelp industry, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. So all of our work is of course driven by our tribal members, our board of directors, which is one appointed person from each one of our 7 tribes. They bring problems to us, and it's our job as their employees to try and fix those problems. Everything that we work on has to do with their traditional foods. They're the foods that they find in the beach, the foods that they harvest in the ocean, and the foods, of course, that they find on land. I'm going to talk about 2 programs that we're working on that are really exciting that happened in the last couple of years. Our tribes have continually expressed concern about the health of their subsistence species. In light of ocean acidification and the changing climate comes some negative effects like harmful algal blooms and paralytic shellfish poisoning. We have a monitoring program for both of those parameters, ocean acidification and harmful algal bloom monitoring, all these, teeny little dots you see on the map here. But we're actually missing a spot. We actually do monitoring in Alutiiq as well. And our facility, which I'll talk about in a minute, is processing all of those samples. This thing is like a ghost, it's just going. We have the space in our facility. It's an ocean acidification lab. Samples that are actually collected in beer bottles, brown beer bottles, are given to us, and we process them for ocean acidification parameters. We also take water samples, process for harmful algal blooms, and then we also take direct tissues from clams, mussels, anything that you can find on the beach, and process those for paralytic shellfish poisoning. And like I said, we focus on our South Central communities, but we have also offered those services around the state, and what's really nice is that we don't have to charge any of our tribal partners. The reason why we do this, and this is the second bullet, is because the Alaska Department of Conservation, they have a very similar HAB and paralytic shellfish poisoning testing capacity, but they're of course doing it for the commercial industry. So before any of you eat an oyster that comes from a farm in Lower Cook Inlet, it has to be tested at DEC for them to say, you are not going to die when you eat this oyster. DEC does a great job of doing that for the commercial industry, but does not have the capacity to offer that to our tribal members, nor does it have a capacity to offer that to me as an Alaskan. Going out, picking up clams when we used to in Clam Gulch, now you have to go across the bay, of course, across the inlet. There's no guarantee that that shellfish that I'm consuming does not have paralytic shellfish poisoning. The Department of Conservation does process those samples, but they always prioritize the commercial industry. And I'm not trying to dog on them, this is all great, but we're trying to fill a gap that they can't do and offer this service to the entire state, but first and foremost, South Central Alaska. Here's just a summary of a meeting that we had recently, that a word cloud, it highlights the times that words are said during the meeting, so you can see that our tribal members are really concerned that they're going to lose their subsistence way of life. They're concerned about shellfish and their clams, and of course concerned about dying from paralytic shellfish poisoning in light of a recent fatality in Dutch Harbor. This is we've all been talking about the Kenai Peninsula and how great it is in South Central Alaska. We are the largest commercial and recreation clamming industry. Opportunities are on the shores of Lower Cook Inlet, and likewise in Prince William Sound with the largest vessel fleet in the state. There's a lot of people who are harvesting shellfish there as well. So it's our goal to try and keep them safe. Is this just really going? Here we go. Sorry. So how we do this is by community sampling. We support mostly tribal members, but some other partners throughout the region in actually providing us the samples. And it takes a lot of work to get a sample from Port Graham to Seward. Let me tell you, there are planes and automobiles and boats involved, and it is not cheap. They give us samples on a weekly basis, and they send us, like I said before, ocean acidification samples, harmful algal bloom samples, and then direct tissue from the subsistence species that they are harvesting, and we try to turn those samples around within a few days. This program has allowed us to gather baseline data on coastal marine conditions in Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet. It's allowing us to provide safe shellfish harvest for all stakeholders. That's subsistence, the mariculture industry, recreational users like you and I. Our goals are to try to predict harmful algal bloom and paralytic shellfish poisoning events so that we can say, you know, we've been seeing a lot of, or over the years, it just shows that July is just a really high time for these events to happen. Maybe you shouldn't harvest your shellfish in July. Let's do it in another month where historically we've seen less events of harmful algal blooms. So now I'll talk about the Kelp Project, and I'm realizing that this black is not showing up very well. I wanted to talk about our current Kelp projects and our future Kelp projects. We have a current project funded by the Economic Development Administration to set out test kelp farm sites in Prince William Sound and to build our hatcheries, our facilities in Seward capacity to grow kelp for the industry. It's been really great, and I'll show a little bit more about that in a minute, but we now have an entire module inside our facility that is a kelp nursery. We have a project that is funded by a private funder, the NDN Collective. We are mining all of the Fish and Game's community subsistence information system, which is data that has been collected since before the Exxon Valdez oil spill, to try to get an idea of what how people have been using kelp in the past, so that we can inform how we move forward as a community in the future in this burgeoning kelp industry. And we've also been doing lab studies at our facility about the carbonate chemistry uptake capacity of kelp. This was funded by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, because when you start digging into the kelp literature, you'll see that they say, oh, kelp's so great, it mitigates ocean acidification, maybe it'll mitigate the pink salmon straying in Prince William Sound. You know, there's a lot of implications, and so we wanted to really understand what that meant. Here's a map of all of our kelp test farm sites that are funded by the EDA. We have them in Nelson Bay, Simpson Bay, Sheep Bay, which really service the native village of Eak, Port Gravina and Boulder Bay, which are near the native village of Tutitlic, Crab Bay, Fox Farm, and Latouche, which are near the native village of Chuniga. And then luckily this year, we had some excess kelp string that we were able to give to some new kelp farms in Jackalope Bay, which has been quite the blessing. So Julie talked a lot about kelp, and she's definitely the expert, but we're culturing 3 different species of kelp in our facility: bull kelp, sugar kelp, and ribbon kelp. Here you see pictures of the collection process last year after our kelp farms had been in the water for the entire winter. Okay, interestingly, a lot of people might not know this, but Fish and Game, they have genetic zones, and it's not just for kelp. They have genetic zones for shellfish. They have genetic zones for a lot of different species. So when you get a species that you are going to culture, you have to outplant that species in that same genetic zone in case there's any disease or cross-contamination. We're not bringing a shellfish or a piece of kelp from southeast, cultivating it, putting it in Kachemak Bay, only to find that it's going to wipe out the population of Kachemak Bay. So we have to collect our adult kelp within a 50-mile radius of where the farm is located. That is done by, depending on species, just scooping the kelp up off the top or collecting it off the beach. But the bull kelp in particular requires divers, because if you just grab the bull kelp from the surface and yank it, you'll actually kill the animal. or the plant, but if you dive down and just cut it off, that plant regerminates. So, as we're trying to be a regenerative economy, it just behooves us not to wipe out the natural population of bull kelp. So this is a picture of our team with the Chugach Heritage's Old Man Charlie boat, beautiful boat. They took us around a tour de West Prince William Sound, Latouche, and Chugach. So immediately, as quickly as possible, that kelp is brought back to the hatchery, it's cleaned, and the spore release is induced. The spore solution then gets placed in the water where we have pre-wrapped PVC pipes, and for the next 4 to 6 weeks, the kelp grows. So this bottom picture that you see here is the module in our hatchery. We grew almost 2,000 linear feet of kelp this year, and we're getting set up to almost double that next year to support all the farms that Julie listed on her presentation. There's a lot of people that have farms with nowhere to get kelp, so we're trying to fill that void for them. After 4 to 6 weeks, those spools are brought out to the farm and they are deployed on the test lines just by literally unwrapping the PVC pipe onto a new line. For the next 5 to 6 months, the kelp will grow. What's nice about kelp is that it's a wintertime product, and we're really hoping that it kind of offsets the commercial fishing fleet, that a lot of the young people will go into this in the wintertime. They'll have their commercial fishing, and then they'll have something to do in the winter with their assets like boats and things like that. So moving forward, our future kelp projects, we have 3. 2 of those are EVO's funding, and from the Exxon Valley's oil spill. Sorry, I'm trying not to use too many acronyms. We're going to expand our test farm site program in Prince William Sound to have more test farm sites, practice a little bit more of our hatchery techniques, and just get a little better in production. We're also going to be learning about the social beneficial, economically viable programs that have to do with kelp and trying to bring in cultural values. And last, which is really fun, is that we're gathering recipes from across the region to make a recipe book to try and enhance people's interest in kelp. So that was all I had to say about kelp, but I wanted to just talk quickly about the project that Tim mentioned that we're working with his group and the EDA on. We have, like I said, we quietly celebrated our 30-year anniversary. In the last 3 years, we've almost quadrupled our amount of baseline funding at the facility. We are 100% grant funded, so that's a huge undertaking. As such, we have quadrupled our workforce in the city of Seward. We now have almost 10 full-time employees at our facility, and we used to only have 2.5 full-time employees, and we've got a lot of part-time employees and a full-time maintenance contractor there. We currently have about 8,000 square feet, and we are bursting at the seams. If we want to be able to continue to provide the services for our communities while also help the mariculture industry, we are going to need to expand. And so we've been working with KPEDD on an application to the EDA under the Indigenous Notice of Funding Opportunity to double our footprint on our leased acreage at the city, and they have been a great partner. They're here today. So that's really exciting. The grant application is due in March, and we're hoping to break ground, if you will, starting next fiscal year. So here I just have some beautiful photos of our kelp site in Chugach Bay. We were monitoring just a few weeks ago. That was the sunrise and that was the sunset, and you can see part of our kelp buoy there. And then ways that you can get in touch with us. So thank you all so very much.